Close your eyes and go back to 2005. The air smells like cheap body spray and anticipation. The iPhone doesn't exist. YouTube has just been born and is barely a blip. Streaming means waiting 45 minutes to watch a 3-minute pixelated video. The internet is still a frontier town. It is messy. It is loud. It is dangerous. And in this digital Wild West, there is one sheriff, one king, one God. His name is Tom, and he is your first friend, MySpace. If you weren't there, you can't understand the sheer gravity of it. It wasn't just a website. It was a digital nation-state. In 2005, MySpace had more traffic than Google. It accounted for nearly 5% of all internet visits in the United States. It was the coolest club on earth, and everyone had a membership card. It was a place of total chaotic expression. You learned HTML just to make your background sparkle. You ranked your friends in a top 8, a brutal social hierarchy that destroyed real-life relationships daily. It was a popularity contest weaponized by code. The company behind it, Intermix Media, was based in Los Angeles, and that location mattered. They weren't silicon-blooded geeks. They were Hollywood. They threw parties at the Playboy Mansion. They hung out with rock stars. They were selling a lifestyle. The CEO, Chris DeWolf, drove fast cars and wore designer denim. He looked at his creation and saw a media empire that would last 1,000 years. But while the MySpace team was popping champagne in LA, something was growing in the dark dorm rooms of Palo Alto. Something cold, something clean, something quiet. Mark Zuckerberg wasn't trying to build a nightclub. He was trying to build a directory. The Facebook was rigid. It was blue and white. No glitter, no music, no customizable backgrounds. It was a utility. And unlike MySpace, which let anyone with an email address inside, Facebook was a fortress. You needed a .edu email. It was exclusive. MySpace was the loud house party where the cops show up. Facebook was the VIP lounge where you needed a password. And Chris DeWolf, he wanted to buy the VIP lounge. He wanted to buy it, gut it, and paste a MySpace logo over the door. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to make the most expensive calculation error in the history of human commerce. Spring 2005. The tension between MySpace and Facebook is often remembered as a war, but at the time, it felt more like a giant ignoring an insect. MySpace had 20 million unique visitors. Facebook had maybe a few million college kids. But Chris DeWolf was smart enough to know that the insect was biting. He decided to squash it the American way, by throwing money at it. He invited Mark Zuckerberg and his president, Sean Parker, to Los Angeles. The meeting took place at MySpace HQ. The culture clash was instant. On one side, you had the MySpace executives, older, polished, confident, smelling of expensive cologne and success. They treated the meeting casually. Why wouldn't they? They owned the internet. On the other side, you had Zuckerberg, 20 years old, socially awkward, intense. He walked into the lion's den with a backpack and a stare that could cut glass. The negotiation started. DeWolf laid out his vision. He didn't want Facebook to run independently. He wanted to acquire it, strip it for parts, and integrate the college network into MySpace. He viewed Facebook not as a competitor, but as a feature he hadn't built yet. Finally, the pleasantries ended. The air in the room grew heavy. DeWolf looked at the kid in the hoodie and asked the only question that mattered. What's the number? What will it take for you to walk away? Zuckerberg and Parker had discussed this. They didn't really want to sell. They believed they were building something that would change the world. But everyone has a price. Zuckerberg said $75 million. $75 million. Today, that sounds like a joke. Facebook makes $75 million roughly every 3 hours. But in 2005, for a website with no revenue and a limited user base, it was a fortune. Chris DeWolf paused. He ran the numbers in his head. MySpace was currently in talks to be acquired by media giant Viacom or News Corp for hundreds of millions of dollars. $75 million was a significant chunk of change, but it was doable. It was a strategic investment. But then, the ego kicked in. DeWolf looked at Zuckerberg, he looked at the hoodie, and he decided he wasn't going to let a college dropout set the terms. He wanted a win. He wanted to show who was the alpha in the room. He countered. We won't pay $75 million. We'll pay $74 million. $1 million. That was the gap. In a deal of this magnitude, $1 million is a rounding error. It is less than the legal fees to draft the contract. It is the cost of the snacks in the break room. It is nothing. But it wasn't about the money. It was a test. DeWolf was betting that Zuckerberg was desperate. He was betting that the kid would cave just to get the deal done. He bet wrong. Mark Zuckerberg didn't negotiate. He didn't counter at $74.5 million. He simply stood up. He felt insulted. Not by the price, but by the game. To Zuckerberg, this wasn't a bazaar. This was the future of human connection. And if MySpace was going to squabble over pennies, they didn't deserve to own the future. He walked out. MySpace kept their $1 million, and they signed their own death warrant. A few months later, Chris DeWolf got his payout. Rupert Murdoch, the titan of old media, the man behind Fox News and newspapers around the world, bought MySpace for $580 million. Chris DeWolf and his team were rich. They were hailed as geniuses. They had sold at the top. But in reality, they had just handed the keys of a Ferrari to a dinosaur. News Corp didn't understand the internet. They didn't understand community. They understood one thing: extraction. They had paid $500 million and they wanted their money back immediately. The order came down from the top: monetize everything. MySpace became a digital billboard. The user experience was sacrificed on the altar of quarterly earnings. The site became slow. It became spammy. It became unsafe. It felt like walking through a bad neighborhood at 2 a.m. Profiles were hacked. Malware spread like wildfire. The cool club was becoming a dive bar with sticky floors and broken windows. And while MySpace was suffocating under the weight of corporate greed, Mark Zuckerberg was executing a masterclass in patience. He kept Facebook clean. He refused to sell banner ads for years. He focused entirely on speed, utility, and real identity. He opened Facebook to high schools, then to corporate offices, then finally to the world. People didn't just switch to Facebook, they fled to Facebook. It was white flight on a digital scale. They left the noisy, dangerous chaos of MySpace for the gated community of Facebook. In April 2008, the flip happened. Facebook overtook MySpace in unique visitors. Once the momentum shifted, it was over. In social media, when your friends leave, you leave. MySpace didn't just decline, it evaporated. The fall was brutal. In 2005, MySpace was valued at $12 billion. In 2011, News Corp, desperate to get rid of the rotting corpse of the site, sold it. They sold it for $35 million. Murdoch lost over $500 million. It remains one of the worst acquisitions in the history of media, a colossal failure of vision, management, and understanding of the product. But the real tragedy isn't what MySpace lost. It's what they could have had. Today, Meta, the parent company of Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, is worth over $1.2 trillion. Mark Zuckerberg is one of the richest men in human history.
He rules over a digital empire that connects 3 billion people. He influences elections, economies, and culture itself. And he does it all with the company that Chris DeWolf refused to buy. Think about that spread. 74 million versus 75 million. If DeWolf had paid that extra million, if he had swallowed his pride, MySpace would have owned the social graph. They would have owned the data of the entire planet. Instead, they tried to save a rounding error, and they paid the ultimate price. In business, we often talk about strategy. We talk about market fit. But sometimes history turns on the smallest, most human of hinges. A laugh in a blockbuster boardroom. A $1 million grudge in the Los Angeles office. Chris DeWolf thought he was negotiating a deal for a website. He didn't realize he was negotiating for the soul of the 21st century. He thought the $75 million price tag was too high. He thought he was being smart. He thought he was holding the line. But the most expensive things in life aren't the checks you write. They are the checks you refuse to sign. MySpace is gone. It is a digital graveyard, a punchline for a generation that doesn't even remember using it. But Facebook remains, a monument to the power of knowing exactly what you are worth. The next time you haggle over the price of the future, make sure you aren't blinking over pennies. This is Red Ink History. Subscribe, because the line between an empire and a memory is thinner than you think.